back to First Watch, the series on my channel where I let fate decide the next film that I get to watch. The only rule is typically I never saw it in my life before. And the same goes for this week's pick, which was Interview with the Vampire. Starring Tom Cruise, starring Brad Pitt, starring all these really big names, and I never saw it before. I'm kind of a big fan of vampires in general, so very curious to see this movie that I feel like I've heard about my entire life. Let's get cracking. Interview with a Vampire is very, very simple when it comes down to the plot. It literally is an interview with a vampire. The vampire in question is played by Brad Pitt, who throughout the runtime of the film just kind of goes through his life story with a journalist played by Christian Slater and how he met his sire played by Tom Cruise, and basically the ups and downs of being a vampire, what that entails, how torturous it can be even though you can live forever, and what you have to do as a vampire. He goes through all the different stereotypes and tropes that are known about vampires, which are true, which are not, and yeah, that's basically the story. I consider myself to be a fan of vampires, like I said before. And I didn't know too much about this film in general, but I feel like it was the main inspiration. This is kind of a random takeaway, by the way, but the main inspiration for in the show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, whenever they would have flashbacks with Angel when he was first a vampire. I see a lot of that in this movie because the time period it takes place in feels very much like that. But overall, I would say this is a movie that didn't impress me and that I don't really see the appeal for. My entire life, what I expected from the movie, I didn't really get because I actually believe that there's a twinge of false marketing associated with it. I believe that it's marketed as a Tom Cruise movie. If you look at the poster, that's what you see. You see Tom Cruise's name alone, and it says Tom Cruise, Interview with a Vampire, and you see his face, and nobody else on the poster. The problem with that is that it's not a Tom Cruise movie. It's a Brad Pitt movie. Tom Cruise plays a side character. Brad Pitt is very clearly the main character. It should be called Brad Pitt Interview with a Vampire. And that's just kind of the start of the problems with the casting here, because from what I could tell, it was way more important to them to have big names associated with the movie than names that fit the roles. I think for the most part, their performances aren't really that great. They feel over dramatic, like they're either trying way too hard or they're not trying at all, like they just don't care about the movie. I don't know why this movie's beloved. I really don't. I don't know why, when it first came out, certain publications like the New York Times called it a masterpiece. I don't know. It is definitely not a masterpiece. Maybe when it first came out in the 90s, it made a little bit more sense and felt more fresh or original, I guess, because when I watch this right now, all it feels like is a collection of vampire stereotypes in something that has basically no story. It literally is just a vampire recounting his life and telling this journalist what it's like to be a vampire, what vampires can do, what it means to have to drink blood to survive, and how horrible it is that sometimes they're expected to kill people and they don't want to kill people. I've seen this all before, and I've seen it done better. And again, Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt don't work well together. They don't fit the roles. In fact, I can back up that claim by saying, and this is true, that after they worked on the movie, Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt vowed to never work again together because they basically hated each other on set. Also, Brad Pitt tried to get out of the movie. He tried to quit it, but he toughed it out because that would have been bad. I really don't like this movie. You do have Kirsten Dunst in the movie, and I do think that she does a fairly decent job in her role, especially given the fact that this was her breakout role, and she did a pretty good job. But everybody else, especially the male leads, I couldn't really care less about. I just don't understand why Brad Pitt's not on the poster. I really don't get that. Wasn't he as big of a star as Tom Cruise was in the 90s? Even to this day, they're both A-class actors. Why doesn't it say Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt at the very least, and have them both on the poster? Why does it only say Tom Cruise? I don't understand that. He is a side character. He is a supporting role at best. Brad Pitt is the main star who's in it from beginning to end. Again, I like vampire stuff as long as it feels fresh and it feels original and it doesn't just feel like it's borrowing from every other trope we've seen in our life when it comes down to vampires that we've seen in Dracula or Nosferatu or whatever, because that's all this movie is. It's just those tropes. There was one bit of lore that I've never heard from any other vampire story, and that was the fact that they have to drink human blood to be strong and be powerful, but they can't drink dead blood. If they drink dead blood, they die or get really, really sick or whatever. It's like poison to them. The heart still has to be beating in order to benefit off of basically being a vampire. I thought that was interesting, but it wasn't consistent because at one point Tom Cruise kills a rat and pours the blood into a glass, which Brad Pitt drinks. That blood ain't from a beaten heart. That literally is from a dead rat. So it's not even consistent with its own set of rules. Overall, I would say that this movie kind of aggravated me. Was it made well enough? I would say that in certain areas, yes. Like for instance, I don't really sense that 90s cheese that you sense with a lot of movies that came out in the 90s more often than not. So it is made well enough, I think. So if we take a look at what I scored Interview with the Vampire, I gave it an F letter grade, final overall score of 39%, 39 out of 100 possible stars. A majority of the bad score here is definitely seen in my bias score of 28%, and that's just because I really didn't like it. I mean, my unbiased technical score is also just 50%, which for me isn't an F on its own, but it's certainly not a great score. That mostly has to do with unoriginality and poor casting choices, and because the casting was poor in my mind, I also thought that the performances weren't all that great. And so it kind of becomes a little bit of a snowball effect for me, in which I really think the movie is not as good as some have pointed it out to be. That's just me though. What about you guys? Have you seen Interview with the Vampire? Are you a fan of vampire TV shows, vampire movies, and such like that? And if you are, what is your favorite vampire film? If you say Twilight, go away. Anyways, yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. As for YouTube, you guys know what to do. Hit that like, subscribe button, and bell to be notified when I come out with my next installment for First Watch. And until then, peace out.